Lovely. Okay, thanks very much, Nathan.
Hello everybody. My talk is on teachers' perceptions of word development in Key Stage 4 classrooms. I feel a little bit stupid, I've just got slides after we've been watching an amazing dialogic interaction between two world-leading experts. So hopefully I'll go through my slides and then we can have a discussion at the end. I'm just trying out Clicker for the first time today. It's not going well. There we go, okay. So, I guess I'll share this because the two speakers talked about how important it is to have a moral fervour for what you're doing. So every time I thought about whether I should do this, the rationale just kept being so strong for me. From on a macro scale, we've got the idea that vocabulary and literacy are crucial indicators of life opportunity. And if we're interested in social mobility and social justice, we have to prioritise in some way, in some ways, literacy. Also, I thought this was kind of interesting. There's a nice article I read about how important vocabulary is for emotional communication, just in terms of well-being of people and healthy citizens. And then this other point about the field of vocabulary teaching just being so broad. There are so many different ways, it's an idea I keep coming back to, that people can use to promote vocabulary across various different subject interests and types of students you're working with. But it's just a very broad and wide field. On a smaller scale, in schools, there's often not necessarily a focus on vocabulary in secondary schools. I'll just point out that I'm talking about English teaching here. So when I talk about vocabulary, I'm sure there's loads of stuff in vocabulary in French lessons and various other places like that. But in English teaching, sometimes vocabulary is not a specific focus. And also, there's really very little research on secondary school vocabulary explicitly. Almost all of my references I'll be using are based on early years, young people, maybe moving up through to junior schools, but I could only find 4 or 5 articles in my kind of search for it all that were explicitly based on teenagers and their use of vocabulary. And then also, as English teachers, we were all concerned about the new vocabulary, particularly 19th century literature coming in, how tough it is to access vocabulary on the sources. So this felt like a real issue in the immediate for me as well, as something teachers would like to work on. And then finally, just working with lots of low literacy learners, and personally I have dyslexia and have struggled with literacy issues, and I kind of have an empathy with the frustrations that can bring, which I'm feeling a bit now, that I might forget my words. So, literature overview, I just tried to break it down in the easiest way possible. As I said, it's a really, really broad field. This one that I've broken it down to borrows on Apthorpe, or borrows from her, but other people have used a more holistic view, where you're maybe focusing on, are you cultivating an understanding of independent definitions of words, or are you trying to create a word learning experience in the classroom? And we'll talk about that more later, but I've chosen this as the best breakdown because it's more practical and maybe more relevant to teachers and what teachers want to talk about. So basically there's 3 kind of components. Word exposure, how do we get students to access or come to meet new words? The second thing is, how do we define new words? And there's loads of discussion and debate about, is that a quick thing, is that contextualised, is that a broad definition with this broad idea of what it means to know vocabulary. And then the third thing is activities, how do we get students to utilise and interact with these words. But the most important thing is that this quote at the bottom, that it's a multi-dimensional field. Teaching vocabulary there are lots of different elements you can put together, and that's why I took the analogy of Lego bricks, because it's like you can make any structure you want from it, but you might take 2 or 3 of these ideas and build them into however lots of teachers might want to teach it. So this is just in a little bit more detail about the lit review, but I probably won't spend too much time on it. Just the idea that in terms of exposure, most of the literature points to the fact that reading is the strongest base for accessing new words and being exposed to new words, for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because of the context that the words are used. There are no gestures, there are no social cues, everything has to be explained in words. So if you're reading a text, the words that you have to use are far more varied than you would in conversation. And there's just good stuff. Cunningham says, like in children's books alone, there are 50% more difficult, challenging, expansive words than there are in primetime TV shows. So books are our #1 resource. They can be motivating. There's some interesting stuff about creating reading cultures to help with that. And teach oracy is another interesting kind of extra look at how we can get people to be exposed to words. Second thing, definitions. So you've got your word selection. So once you're using your text as your base, all the research says that teacher interaction intervention does improve, does help. And there are a couple of reasons for that. Firstly is word selection. The teacher can work out which words are going to be most precisely useful for the young people to learn in a way that is more difficult if you're independently reading. And there are various different ways to do it. Maybe an interesting thing is Beck and McCohen look at utility of a word rather than frequency. What is going to be the most useful, and they talk about kind of cross-curricular words. And that's an interesting avenue to explore. Elaboration and morphology. Bowers talks a lot about breaking down into root, prefix, suffix, and the idea that if you can then turn maybe like 100 root words into 5,000 words in various combinations. And then also this idea of answering questions using contextual inference, teaching students to become capable of working out their own meanings from them. So all these things come from teacher interventions. And then the last one is activities. And I guess the thing I want to emphasise about this is that it relates a lot to the dialogic interactions that we were having at the start of the proceedings today. There's two speakers, and they talk about kind of trying to cognitively process these words in a dialogic setting where you're using the words to making them fit into your semantic maps. And interesting about semantic relatedness, we can do activities that might focus on antonyms and synonyms and connotations of the word, things that are going to help to develop our word webs in our mind, which is how we actually retain our words. Anyway, despite all of this, overwhelmingly some of the broader systematic reviews talk about the fact that there's really not a satisfactory conclusion to research and vocabulary. Particular issues are generalised comprehension. So if we teach target words, they always improve their understanding of the text that word is in. But then if you present them another text that doesn't have those target words, their comprehension doesn't seem to have improved. Their ability to understand words and pick up new words isn't increased. And so there's this idea that maybe we need to think of fundamentally a different way to look at how we learn words. And that's why I was interested in taking on these research questions going forward with teachers. So I wanted to ask teachers what strategies they used, but bear in mind it's such a broad topic. I wanted to ask them how successful they thought these strategies were, and I wanted to ask them what factors in their professional context either inspire or hinder teaching of vocabulary, particularly looking at Key Stage 4, because it was the thing that was researched the least, basically. It says, you get older, it seems like vocabulary drops off the agenda. So here's my research design. I tried to do semi-structured interviews with a mediating artefact, and that's something I'll talk about a lot, probably on the next slide, so it goes into a bit more detail. I tried to use documentary evidence where I went into their classrooms and took photos of what they had around their room, anything I picked up on the walk, kind of when I met them in the atrium and walked to their classrooms. And then I kept a research journal. And all this was the idea of trying to capture teachers' reality of vocabulary instruction. I was so keen on the notion that they're the experts, and we talk a lot about student voice, but I think we all experience the need for teacher voice hugely. We're doing our own research projects in our classrooms every day, and I was just desperate to try and work out how I could capture that most authentically. That's backwards again. So I won't talk for ages. The thing I'll go straight for is, I guess, the idea I wanted this case study just to be illustrative. I wasn't going to test any theory. I just wanted to know what did teachers like about teaching vocabulary, what works, what didn't work. And sometimes that can be seen as not actually very useful, but then there's some great stuff about how useful that can be in terms of providing contextualised knowledge that is really important to go from to develop expert knowledge. So if you're already a professional and you want expert knowledge, you don't want basic theories that are reductive. You want rich contextualised ideas, and hopefully you can elicit that from an illustrative case study that would then be useful to an expert audience, which we are as teachers. How's time? 5 minutes to go. Wow. Okay. So I did semi-structured interviews, and one thing that I loved was to use mitigating artefacts. And this is this whole idea of being collaborative. I didn't want to research on, I wanted to research with teachers because they are the experts. So I wanted to use mitigating artefacts, which is where you kind of could describe it as show and tell. So I asked the broad question, what would represent teaching vocabulary in your classrooms? And they would bring me something that it could be, and I thought that was really good because it was collaborative and it allowed them to show me any type of intervention they use. Now, bearing in mind that vocabulary is so broad, there are so many different things you could use, they could show me exactly what reflected their own practice. So there's data analysis, but maybe I'll just go to findings. We got mitigating artifacts I found supported rich and deep collaborative discussions, and I'll show an example later on. Teachers used a wide variety of strategies to support vocabulary, and those are some of the 4 things that we'll talk about later on as well. And knowledge is hard to measure and difficult to quantify in terms of vocabulary. Exam pressures in 19th century texts prevent effective vocabulary. There's a summary of my findings, and I'll go through it now. So mitigating artifacts were hugely successful. They gave me 3 things. One thing was a variety of starting points. And here's just my 6 interviews and the different ways they started. And you can notice how varied that is. So some people went straight for a vocabulary bank because that's what they brought with them. Some people wanted to talk about creative writing, to talk about colours. Some people wanted to talk about teacher oracy and the language that teachers use. Some people wanted to talk about vocabulary to pass exams. Some were talking about more specific students, nurture groups. And I just really liked the way that it started off in such a broad way, because I felt if I had gone to teachers, oh, do you use lots of talk to teach vocabulary? They'd say yes, and the interview would start there. Or if I would say, do you use word banks? It would start there, and I wanted it to be over to them. I also really liked that it helped me to see how people were, for them to model the strategies. So this is someone in the room who I won't mention, but what they did was they talked me through as if they had their resource in front of them, and they talked me through as if they were teaching or using it to plan their lesson. And I felt like it gave you a real sense of the authenticity of what they were telling me that they were doing. And then finally, it evoked elaboration and new ideas. So this idea of one of the respondents trying to think about something. How do I, oh, now look. And he would go and grab a book and write about it. So this is the other side of mitigating artifacts, that I did these interviews situated within their classrooms, which I really recommend because it gave such, we kind of don't realise how much we do. And if you're in your classroom, you look around and you've got a year's worth of work and teaching ideas all around you, you suddenly come to these great findings. So yeah, really helpful. Shall I go on to? No, forward. So just in terms of some interesting findings with this, hugely wide strategies. We had from spelling test to AFL to monster voices. People just had so many creative ideas, and that's just my one finding that I'm pleased with as well, because it shows that it is so multidimensional and so varied based on your class and your ideas and your personality. People loved the idea of independent reading, but most of them, I thought was fascinating, almost all of my interviews started with pre-teaching. The idea of pre-teaching vocabulary or specific word banks was what everyone started with. And then, once we got through a few of the follow-up questions, what they thought was most effective or what you use most commonly, reading always came out in there as something they wanted to use more and more. And I think that's an interesting idea, how we conceptualise vocabulary teaching, because I think often what's in research question 2 is about how hard it is to measure. And if we're judged on accountability for results and measurability, then we're always going to go to something which is really safe, which is like have a word bank. Now, do they use that word bank? Whereas actually a lot of teachers seem to believe that independent reading is what we should, hopefully ideally, try and promote more. And then that interesting thing, which I think is missed out in a lot of the literature, here goes the laser pointer, is that vocabulary for writing was talked about a lot. Almost everybody started, bar one, started with talking about vocabulary for writing, and in the literature it's almost dominated by reading, vocabulary and reading. So I'll just move on to my last 2 findings real quick. So that idea that vocabulary is really hard to measure, so it makes it a really difficult thing for us to talk about and for teachers to feel accountable for how successful their students are. And again, the idea of if you're doing direct instruction, they're more confident. But also this idea that motivation and engagement was considered a justifiable, measurable measure of how successful their vocabulary teaching was. So I asked lots of teachers, is this successful? And they would say, well, my students are really engaged in reading, and that seemed to be a really good measure of how successful it was. And that wasn't something I necessarily expected to find. And then finally, what factors inhibit, and we've got our 19th century texts, basically. Almost everyone came to the fact that these texts are so impossibly difficult that we can't kids can't access this. There are too many challenging words in them for them to use all those skills we want to teach about kind of contextual understanding, that kind of idea. And then also, what inspires, really I was struck by teacher enthusiasm. So many teachers were just like, I love words. and they would tell me about loads of examples, how much they loved words. But then also, interestingly, teacher knowledge was a really big one, and that brought me to the final one of just saying that the interview process was almost everyone said how much they enjoyed it. It was a time to stop and reflect on a topic they don't often consider. And so that was another interesting finding. Now, I've run through that so quickly and missed out like 90% of everything I wanted to say, but I hope there was something interesting in that for you.
Certainly was.